recording it too?
Just for my reference. I gently do it when I give live demos.
Come inside. Not
Yeah.
yet.
We're just starting.
Usman's here. We can all get going now.
Yeah.
I would.
Okay, let's start. Today I'll be talking about Dockers and how the different use cases we can use for different purposes, and the different features, and also understand the concept of Linux containers, like how we have a concept of virtualization. It's just a step ahead of that. So what is Docker? Docker is an open source project. It's really lightweight. What it does is it actually imitates the Linux object. So you have something called C group at a kernel level. So it takes the slice of a network, it takes the slice of a memory, and it almost does the imitation, and so that it gives the image a feeling that you have a kernel lying below, but it's actually not. So it uses the base image space and pretty much does it. So this makes it really fast when compared to VM. So let's get into more, and probably we'll start exploring as we go on demo. We'll probably understand the different features. So in this demo, we'll be seeing how we can use Dockers, the concept of Linux containers, and VirtualBox. I mean, I can install the Docker in VirtualBox or AWS, and even using Vagrant. So, and then we'll have a live demo on how we can build an image or destroy an image, and then how you can create a container of Java application, and then MongoDB and export it. So Docker essentially uses a Linux container concept. So like how you have virtualization is a concept, and it's a technology, I would say, and then AWS or OpenStack or Rackspace is just the framework that they are using the virtualization APIs, giving them the services of virtualization. Similarly, even the Docker is doing the same thing. Linux containers was actually started in 2005 by Solaris, called Multics and Solaris Zones. They had a lot of problems with respect to performance and stuff, but in Ubuntu, as the kernel improved, they could really do it. So it was a part of Ubuntu 12.04. So the Linux containers is itself there. So it need not itself install anything. So the package is already there for the Linux container. So I can invoke any container of, and but Dockers, what they did is they, from 6.0, like in intermediate versions, they had a build of wrapper so that they can communicate to the Linux containers. So as I said, it takes the user space and also the kernel space so that it can talk to a container. So this image shows you what is the difference between invoking a VM, a full VM, and a Docker container, and what makes it so fast, because it assumes that it already has the bins and the library which it needs. So installing any application becomes really easy and fast. And what is the provision time for when you compare with the full VM? Why should I go for LXC? Because it provisions in seconds and milliseconds, that we will see in the demo. And it almost runs like a bare metal. And performance wise itself they have done a lot of performance testing on this for companies like IBM and OpenStack, and they're exploring more to make it stable and use it for production. And what is the flexibility that I get? So I get the flexibility of containerizing a system with many applications, just like full VM. I can say I have a Git, Java application, like how we are running now in a full VM. Or I can containerize an application if I want to isolate the two applications. I want a database and in one container and a Java application in a container, so that for migration it can be easier. One of the example that I read yesterday was they mount a volume where the data is located, and they initiate the two Docker instance. So both the pointer is pointing to the same data space. Even if one goes down, you still have the access to the CouchDB database. And then the example is already there. I mean, people have tried that out. And then it's open source, and it has really good support. So we'll see how, in terms of support, how it is. And so I just wanted to show in this the Docker history. So we have a type 1 hypervisor, and then Linux container, how it has. But when it comes to Docker, Docker acts like a wrapper and communicates with LXC. So then it has like CLI command, like how you do it for AWS with like invoke an image. Almost you see the operations of AWS and Docker is similar. The reason I could grasp this concept fast is AWS CLI commands, I knew it well, and it was pretty easy. And then I also have the ability to communicate using REST APIs. And then I have like config files, how you have Puppet files, you have Dockerfiles to build any repo or an image or a container. So how can you install in VirtualBox? There are three ways that I can initiate a Docker. One is have a VM. On VM you can do it. I just wanted to show you. So either on VM I can invoke, or on your machine, or AWS, or even I can use Vagrant. So Vagrant, nothing it does is just communicates with its virtual machine and helps you invoke it. So there are like examples. I have the Vagrant file, which brings a CentOS, essentially installs everything. These are the needs. So CentOS, it has some packages. cgroup Lite in Linux is an alternative for LXC because they don't want to use it. So this was an additional package that they wanted to use. And then in AWS, so what we do is, today when I'll be demoing, I'll be using AWS because yesterday when I was showing demo, I had to switch over. There was some latency and stuff like that. But it's easy. I have both the setup ready. I can demo in both. And then in AWS, what we do is, when I invoke an instance, I do a bootstrap. So Docker has given a bootstrap scripts. So if I just include as a script, it's gonna be up. And my Docker, whatever the setup and additional instances with the latest Docker server and client is installed. So now let's.
Just one question. When you talk about VirtualBox, are you talking about the Oracle VirtualBox
Yeah.
application?
Yeah.
Okay, which is the
Yeah, it's just again.
which you can use to spin up CentOS.
Yeah,
ISOs
exactly.
And other things. Okay.
So, I mean, if I have a base as my Linux machine, I can just install it. That's what I meant when I say I have my local machine as Linux. So I just have to install it. But since we use Windows and then we virtualize, and then from Dockers I can use. So we have virtualized environment, and then we are doing Dockers, like again another layer of virtualization. I mean, the hardware now supports any layer of virtualization. So they do have constraints, like they want the latest kernel to be 3.6. Like if you have, because when we tried in Nokia, it was 3.4, it was outdated, and they don't allow the kernel update because it screws up. But we got some images with updated Linux version with 3.6, and then we could play around. Okay, so demo time. So, but before starting the demo, I want to ask all of you, like, if you have to install a Django application, how much time would you take? And I mean, say these are the tools, how much time would you take for provisioning it?
Half a day.
Half a day?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
okay, if you're
Just
fast, and if you're aware, and
Django, if I'm looking at Graphite, probably takes 2 to 3 hours. Download all the packages and put them on the box.
yeah.
MongoDB is pretty easy. It's sudo yum
True.
install MongoDB.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you have all the scripts ready, if you say 2 hours, then I would say in Dockers it takes just 5 minutes, and less than 5 minutes. It depends on network speed too. But if you invoke any VM, it's going to take a couple of seconds. So, and then the Dockers is pretty fast. So you can see the differences. I'll be starting from scratch in AWS. When I invoke an instance in AWS, see the amount of time that it takes, and then as I install these applications, we'll see the difference. So I'm not sure how many of you have played around with AWS. I mean, for me, it's just an instance, so I'm not teaching anything of the AWS because it's the giving ports and RAM, memory and stuff. It's easy here, so that's the reason I get to choose a good instance here. So I'm choosing. I don't want micro instance. I want medium with 3.7 gig. I go to advanced and then I say text details. Here I'm trying to bootstrap. So this is like a bootstrap script which makes my environment ready for So I want to edit the security group because I already have enabled the ports, SSH ports and all. So I'm choosing the security group because these are the ports that I'm using. And Docker uses, if I don't mention any port, say if you see 8080, it's for Tomcat, 8000 for Django. And then these are the 4900 onwards or 50 onwards are the ports reserved by Dockers. I mean, itself assigns us if I don't mention it. Because there are some examples I really don't care about giving a port address, so I just like invoke it. So now you'll see the VM is going to take a couple of minutes to In fact, the Dockers are so good, like how the AWS acts like in zones, availability zones. Even I can have the Dockers located in different zones, volumes located. I mean, there are a lot of exploration going on. It's not production ready yet, but you never know if this is going to be next thing. Meanwhile, I'll open my putty, load my key. So still its status is initializing. The reason it's bootstrapping. When I get into the AWS and say Docker, it's not going to be up because it's behind the scene, it's setting up.
How long does it take to install that?
Not much, for 5-10 minutes, but I don't want to again handle the kernel version, check that, and this is like a live demo I'm giving from scratch, so it makes things easier.
Gotcha.
I could have made a script which would have done a bunch of things. So it takes a couple of seconds. Yeah, here you go. So now when I install Docker, so I say Docker version. So right now the server is running with .9.1 and client as well as working with .9.1. So reason is Docker server helps in building the Docker containers, and then client actually helps in just communicating. And so if you see the list of commands, we have like attach. So if you want to attach to a container, inspect. So probably if I say now, you won't probably get it, but if I show the demo, you'll know it. So let's start.
Is the machine up already? Or
Yeah.
Is it coming up right
No, it's up now.
You should just log into it,
Yeah, logged in. The bootstrap loaded it. We saw when I did Docker, it was not up. And then when I did Docker, it's running behind. But it's just like a bootstrap. I can invoke a VM with saying, hey, install this before once you're up.
So the image you used, like, was that a predefined image of some sort?
It's a
Already
basic
had
Linux
Docker?
Ubuntu image.
Okay. So you were saying Docker is already available. But
No,
you
this
can't-
is right now. I've not started with Docker. Now I'm starting with Docker. So this was like a very first version. I have a VM. Just think it's a VM with Docker installed, and I just check the version. Now, whatever the operation going further from now is the Dockers. So if I want to run a basic, any program would start with a basic Hello World program. Before that, I wanted to explain an important concept. That's because that's the way that Linux container works. So I think we have containers, and you have images. Come on. You have images. So whenever I do a base image, or say the BusyBox have a minimal version called BusyBox. Docker has a minimal base, which is just true anyway. So this has nothing. It's essential files for the Docker or the container to invoke. Now imagine I invoke sudo apt-get update. So this is going to give me a container ABC, and with an image IABC. This is like a hash. And this resulted in exit 0. It's like a single process, and you can install anything. So if I invoke many commands, so say I have now X, Y, Z, so I'll have intermediate containers, intermediate images. Once I see that exit 0 has happened at this stage, imagine this is step 10, and I got I10 ABC, then the intermediate containers are deleted. This you will see this, because when I install MongoDB, I'll have tons of things running around, and then it will just delete it. And all I have is container and an image. At this point, I should know that this is a read-only. On always an image is a read-only. But container, or I would say an instance, is I can read and write. So that's what Docker imitates. And now if you see this versioning as you get the object, it's something similar to Git. I can see what has happened. Either I can combine 10 steps and invoke as one command, or I can step one, you know. Say I had these all steps combined together, gives me this one. And also another thing is Docker also checks which is a stable version, exit 0. Oh, okay, I'm skipping this. Oh, variable, I have some change in command, then I have to change it. But there are ways I can forcefully change it too. So this is the essential concept of how Docker works.
What are we going to do now? Might be a good time to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't you take a break, take 5 minutes, and
Yeah.
break some food.
The order in which we just like all the pieces up there, it's pretty cheesy.
Base image and printing hello world and just exiting. So
I'm sorry, say that again. You're pulling up a base image and then.
yeah, I have a BusyBox, a BusyBox base image. I'm gonna run BusyBox. The Docker run command essentially runs the image. I mean, whatever the image you have run, and it gives me a container when I run it. And the command is bin echo hello world.
So BusyBox makes a virtualization software.
No, actually.
Is this different?
No, they have Docker has its own images, which the least minimal version, like CentOS minimal, you have it.
Right.
So similar to that. So I got hello world. So let's see what are the images. If you see the image, it's just 2.4, and if you see Docker ps-a. So ps is just like a command which is running. Now right now the container is not running. If I say -a, it says these are the images that it's run. So first it gave exit 0, and then it get an echo, the two steps.
So you ran and then it died?
What?
The busy box. So you ran the command hello world and then
Yeah,
it
so
died.
it's essentially spring up on base image and then printed it. So essentially it has nothing, just like a basic box which has a capability of echoing stuff. But going further, we'll have a sudo update and stuff like that, do whatever we want.
So what's contained within the container, if that makes sense? The host OS is part of your core AWS image.
Mm-hmm.
So what resides in the container? Is it just libraries and
Yeah,
code?
let's see. If actually I can configure the container the way I want, but Docker itself take cares with the default values. Now, if I am interested to see what is the configuration that it has run with, I can say inspect. This is the stuff. So I get a JSON response saying that this is the basic, and then IP address, no gateway configured, no mapping done, and then there's a mount volume. So this question is more about the C groups concept, the Linux kernel concept, the way it's grabbing the space from the kernel and it's invoking. And if you have to run container, you really won't bother much, but if you have to say are conscious about the mount volume space or IP address stuff, then you can configure it. So this has like TTY false, TTY right now is not enabled. That's why I have to invoke it. So there's no terminal types. And then the home path environment, it is a basic stuff. So it gives me the time as well.
Can you get the container from
Outside?
from the net?
Yeah. I mean,
Minimal container.
yeah, I can do, there is a index like Docker images.
Mm-hmm.
So either I can get the base images or whatever I do. Imagine I pull my web application, pull it in my Docker container, I can push it, just like Git. So when I said pull, it essentially means I'm pulling from somewhere. It actually searches my local repo first, whether it's the busybox is there or not. Going further, any example I search, it will first search for the busybox there or not, and then it's going to search for the repository.
If your image is local
Mhm.
from that VM,
Where is it residing?
if someone accidentally destroys the VM image
Mm-hmm.
on the virtual box, that means that the Docker image is also
Because it's residing in the volume of the VM.
Yeah, okay.
So
Container with host.
yeah,
That's
but
great.
there is a space where the mount volume is there. Probably you can refer those details, but since you have not exported, it may not be in readable format.
What's the performance like for,
The Docker performance.
like if you run something within Docker, what's the performance?
The performance is really good because there's no interaction. If I get into a Docker and run few commands, I see is only its own process, and even if I say time, it's going to be just in seconds. That's the reason it does everything so fast. And even in the demo, whatever I'll be showing further, it's so fast that what happened, you'll be thinking, and unless I explain you, these are the steps that went on. So imagine now I run a container in a loop. Say I have a script and I want to see what's happening. So I can run this in a loop while true, just echo and then. So in this case, I'm not using the base image as my busybox. I'm running as my Ubuntu because Ubuntu has few more things. So just like that's 60 MB again. I could have used busybox too, but I just wanted to show a base Ubuntu image, which is like a precise 12.04 for Docker. And I can see the logs of what was happening. Since I didn't mention the Ubuntu version, it's pulling all versions of Ubuntu. When I say Docker images, I'll see 12.04, 13.04. My mistake. I mean, I can have my repo with, so there are like examples in MongoDB. Either I can configure this with a config file, or I can pull this repo with MongoDB already installed. So all I do is just these 4 steps, and my Docker is ready with the Mongo. So just a couple of seconds. Live demo is kind of tough, you know which example is going to fail. So this is printing in loop. So I'm actually getting the logs. The log actually gets the standard output of whatever the entry command it's running. The entry command in this case was hello world. So it keeps running. So even if I have to run an SSH file, so entry I have to give it as this, so that every time I connect to the Docker, it lands up in SSH. So I can also see Docker images, its graph, what has changed, and see, I told you, right? And I said Ubuntu, it pulled all the versions of Ubuntu. There's like repo and then tag. I have to specify both. Since I didn't specify the tag, it pulled all the Saucy, Raring, Quintel, Lucid. And then this is how it gives an image of what happened. I mean, these are just basic examples, so I'm not seeing any like so BusyBox. When I pulled, it was 2.4, and then I added something, and then this BusyBox I have not done anything. But going further, if I pull something, the size is going to grow. Say you can see the CouchDB, it will be initially 180, and then the MongoDB, and then the size will be like 600 MB. Because I don't know what it installs, it pulls, and so I can run. I can also get the image of this tree. So if you see Ubuntu, these are the versions, and I got the MongoDB. So I did an SSH example, and I got this as a final version. This is the tag what I have applied. If I don't apply tag, it's going to remain like this. So like this, you can see. So these are this export is the Docker functionality. So all I have to do is install this visgraph, and then if I say Docker images dot output, it's going to give me docker.png. I mean, I have to win SCP and pull it, so I didn't want to do it at this time. So there are 2 ways of configuring or running a Docker. One, I can run this config file and get an image, or I can manually configure the commands whatever I want. So mkdir sshd docker. So any file name that if you have to configure it, you have to name it as Docker file. So I'm going to run an SSH service, because that's something essential that everyone wants to do it. So I'm going to update, pull from Ubuntu image. Maintainer is something I can have any ID. It's just like a comment who's doing it. And apt-get, I'm running a command apt-get, and then I'm running an install OpenSSH server, and then I'm make an SSHDR and expose 22 port. So this command, it actually builds with Dockerfile dot. So it self-identifies with whatever the Docker file you have it in the current location. And then I'm tagging it with Shafi/SSHD. So it's pulling and then it's updating actually because it had already the repo locally. It didn't pull from the public repo. And then after this, I'll be able to SSH. All I have to do is run this. I need a SSH ID and then the port. See, as I told you, it removed the intermediate containers because it's not needed. So I got the SSH ID, container ID with that. And then now I'm going to expose the port. I'm going to bind the Docker container with port 22. So as I said, it itself assigns some port. If I say Docker PS, not PS-A, because the process is still running as a daemon. So I can see that my image is running with port 49 something. Okay, and then so internally I can connect it. So 49153, and my IP address is the internal IP address of AWS. So 10.147.176.82. Bingo. So the password what I configured with was password. Now I'm inside the container, but through SSH. Now I can connect to this Docker from anywhere because I have enabled the port, like configured the port like that.
What's the relationship between the container and the host operating system? From the container, can I get back to the host operating system and manipulate?
Yes. Right now I'm inside the container. I can get back, or I can connect it as an SSH service to a container itself. Since right now in this system I'm a host machine, a server, and client, so you'll not find much difference, but you can isolate stuff. So if you think from application perspective,
I'm sorry, let me stop. I can isolate the container from the host operating system, is that what you just said?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I will show you that as well. That's the reason they say it'll be a future deployment way. I mean, the way the things will be deployed will be changing, because whatever the Docker is there, the Docker framework or the Linux LXC framework understands the file system of a container. So I can export the image and give it to you. Say I have a developer version, I developed a Java code within the container, and then I export it and I give it to you. It's going to be same. So all I have to do is import it. So I'll be showing a demo as well where we'll delete all the images and then import it, and still it'll be there. So this is you were asking about the file system. I think it has the least. It has only the root file system, and it accesses the base machines v-slicing. So it does the slicing. And one interesting fact what I observed during the demo is I did not bother about the internet. I mean, I did not how to configure the VLANs and all that bridging. If you see it itself acts as a virtual host, because I did show you in the beginning that it was just eth0 and loopback localhost. Now there were two images with something operations running, so it itself created it. I can configure if I want, like I have my own private IP. Okay, Now next example, going to CouchDB. So in this example, the previous example, I showed you how to do it with a Docker file, with this Docker file. But now in this example, either I can do it from the config file, which basically pulls the distribution of MongoDB. It requires some file. I'm really not bothered about the installation aspects of MongoDB. But since I have the image ready, I'm just gonna run through this. And then I'm binding the port, MongoDB port with 27010, and then I'm installing the client. All as like, these are the 2 steps too. So time starts now. It's gonna take a couple of seconds. So what it did is it unable to find an image. If you see this line, it says I'm not able to find it locally. So I'm going to check it in Docker public registry. Docker is planning to make money with making private repos too, like for companies. So per month, $7 per image, something. So yeah, as I said, it's pulling the repo, but base one, and then I said it's 400 MB. Now after this step, if I see the size or the Docker version tree, I'll get an image like this, something like this. MongoDB having it got from Ubuntu Precise 12.04, then it did all the steps, and then it got me to this stage. Yeah, some of the steps are deprecated, but still it works for me. So once I have this, I'm going to install a MongoDB client because I want to connect it to the system. So if you see, it's binded with port 41 MongoD. So it's a daemon process. So, and it's binded with 4194, and it's communicating through its internal port, generally which MongoDB communicates on or gets clients connected. So like I have 2 ports binding. So
I'm sorry, it handled the configuration on its own, or you put a bind in? DC bind?
I can externally bind it, or I can just leave it to default. As I said, since I didn't define the port on which it has to bind, it assigned the IP here. This is like an internal.
No, I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Docker did that, or you did that?
Docker itself binds it.
Okay.
But I have the capability of binding too. For example, in going forward, I will configure a Tomcat with 8080. So when I say IP address .8080, it's going to bind with internal IT 8080. So Mongo 10.147.176. So the port is 49154. There you go. It took me hardly 1 minute or 2.
You spin up the Dockers with the Mongo
Yeah.
image, and then the client is on the host.
Yeah, right now, since everything is in one machine,
Yeah.
like if you think from Mongo perspective, I saw first I bought a Mongo pulled and Mongo image where Mongo was already installed.
A Docker's image.
I mean Docker's image, which was there in the public repo.
Sure.
I told you I can do it this way as well. I can have my own configuration file. Imagine there are some additional special versions of Docker. Right now I think at 10G which is installing. If I want another version, I can configure it this way. I can say I can add a maintainer who is maintaining it and stuff, because there will be like different branches who is maintaining what repo or container. And then I'm exposing the port here. So that's why I have I've written like either, there are different ways of running small files. I'm really not aware of Mongo operations. I thought this example would be useful because, and then if I say find post, there you go. So Mongo operation, that's what we did. So this is one example. So I'm out of this, and then now if I see the Docker images, see the size or you can see it's growing up. Like if you see the busy box is 2 and then MongoDB is like 600. And there's something images match to this, how it became so fat.
But you're not carrying the whole operating system stuff.
Yeah, I'm installing what I want, so obviously the performance will be good. There's no interaction between the other application. Imagine I have a Java application running in the same container. It would have definitely affected. Now you're not sure what caused it, but here I have better control because it's isolated.
I also noticed too, from the virtualization layer, that you're not specifying CPU or memory. So
But
how do you isolate that from a container standpoint? Something like Mongo, which is a resource block.
yeah, because the C groups itself takes care of it. Like now for C group, when inside a Docker, it thinks I'm the only application running. If I say PS, it's only the CouchDB stuff, and the C group actually slices and gives it. So definitely it depends on the base image too, because that's where it's getting sliced from.
Sure, but I mean, something like Mongo, where when you spin it up, will consume all the memory on the box
Yeah.
by default.
So do you configure that in a Dockerfile or?
I'm not sure like how to configure the CPU stuff. I'm not gone to that extent, but
Oh.
there are ways. I have a detailed performance report on how Dockers can be scalable and have maximum process for this or CPUs. I'll share it with you with
Sure.
respect to performance.
Well, I think, and you had mentioned before that they can run on a cluster of machines.
Yes.
You can just scale out the cluster and the Docker just runs across
So-
the cluster, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
So the Docker concept is something real or related to the real-time entity. Like Docker is just like a board on which it travels through a ship. So whatever I need, I transport it to you in a ship. I can have a fleet of Dockers running,
Sure.
something like that. So I can have Mongo to switch over, anything. It depends on how you configure it. And there are already frameworks which is doing it. Fleet is one example. And then if I want to manage the Dockers, just like in how you saw in AWS, the IPs, runtime, or whatever I did PS, there's something called Shipyard. All I have to do is install it, bind it with the daemon process of a Docker, so that I can see all the images. So next example we'll be seeing either I'll do a Python one or Python Django app or Java app. You can choose because we have short of time.
Probably the Java.
Yeah, because I know Java users are a lot. Because even I have done it to configure a Tomcat with all the config file and deploy it. It takes, since I don't have the ready-made scripts, manually if I have to do it, it takes almost half a day. But this is like, oh, great. Okay, so let's get back mkdir Tomcat 7 Java app. I missed. Okay, so VI. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm pulling from Ubuntu Saucy as a base, and then I'm running apt-get update and upgrade, and then I'm installing software properties, Java, then Oracle 7, Java 7 version, and Tomcat 7. And then I'm also duplicating some basic HTML page like nokia.org, and I'm putting into varlib web apps. That's where the web application resides. And then I'm going to run the Tomcat in a background so that I want my container to be running the Tomcat behind. In fact, it's a logs. So I'm going to tag my container or an image with Tomcat 7. It's going to take a couple of minutes. Once I do that, if I say bind, here in this case I'm binding 8080 internally and external 8080. So when I go to that host anywhere, I can just access the web app. All we are supposed to see is the Nokia base page. Another thing is, currently what I'm doing is build. So when I give build, it's just building. What will happen if I build again? It will not happen anything because it thinks that these steps are already executed. And I have the image for this intermediate steps. I'm just going to exit it out unless I change it.
And there's like a clean and
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
concepts.
It's
Same building.
they have related to a lot of real-time examples like Git and clean wave and stuff. There is a big community which is like contributing. So there are like examples already available. This example, most of them are found it on internet. Very few I coded and known. And you can do anything like push the repo once you do it and use it as a base image.
I have to run. I have a couple questions, so I may stop by
Okay.
later.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
No, I'll be winding up in 5-10 minutes. So now it's downloading Nokia website, and probably it's a security stuff. I think it's stuck in pulling that. It's not able to execute this command, wget.
Nokia.org or com?
Yeah.
Com.
Yeah. Now we'll see that it'll skip all the steps. It's okay. Sometimes this is also learning. See, it skipped all the thing, and then boom. And now,
Did you do that on purpose?
yeah, exactly.
Let me show you the power.
Yeah.
And so now that I ran the Docker, and if I have to test it locally, I can do it. So if I say wget 10.147.176.82 8080. I got an index page. Now if I have to the reason I chose AWS is because it's kind of fast, and with respect to pulling, we don't have restriction if I use a Nokia server. So it's running in a Docker. So similarly, I have the example even for Django, but I'll not be doing it because it's almost same. And Yeah, this is an interesting example. I'm gonna delete an image and couple of.
Should we take a pause here? Because we're definitely out of time, but, I mean, if people have questions, jump in and fire some questions if you have any.
Yeah.
So actually, if we can go back to your fleet comment.
Yeah.
All right, so I have 100 servers and I'm running Dockers across 20 of them. What is the underlying communication? How is it communicating between boxes and servers? And do I need a Docker manager?
There is I'll show you probably. I think there is a detailed description of how it works, and this demo shows it everything how you can fleet up, and then it fleet IO, or it acts like a wrapper to the Docker.
Okay.
So now it has its own config file to configure the cluster and stuff. I've not played around with this to confirmly say that this is how it works. But there's a good support, I would say. I mean, in this example, he invokes some n number of, say, cluster size. He's doing an AWS, but they're like you can do it privately too. It has support for.
But the same thing where you still need to know from the AWS component how to configure your cluster. You still have to build out your individual machines. You still have to create the virtualization layer.
You don't need one actually, because you don't. It's not a mandatory that you have to run it in a virtualized environment. You can.
No, I'm saying though, you need the underlying component.
Yeah, underlying system. I
The
need it as a
underlying
base
operating
machine.
system.
Yeah, I need a base machine where it's robust enough, and I can have n number of containers, and then ability to. I can export it from one machine to another machine. Say, for example, in this example, what I do is I commit an image with something ID, and then I save it and export it to a tar when I can again load it back. So I can still able to, because the kernel understands what was there, and Docker framework itself understands it.
So this possibly buys you the anonymity on the box in running your application in a space that is yours, right? And it gives you some security aspect as well, but it gives you the anonymity of several Java applications running on the same machine, possibly stomping all over each other.
Yeah, but you can actually enforce even the security aspect as well. Like you can, right now I'm running as a root, but you can run enforce security as well too.
No, security aspects is as far as one user space doesn't have access to the other user space, which doesn't have access to the other user space. So from a security standpoint, if you hack my app, you don't get access to the whole box.
Yeah, you mean the Docker if you hack
Yes.
it? I don't think, and I'm not sure about it as well, because I've not explored to that level. But there are companies who are working, like invoking clusters and stuff in this in Dockers. It's not, there are like pros and cons. You find some articles saying that Docker so and so, but there are companies who are working also on improving the kernel access wise or the space wise. Because one thing, if you see it, the space is like a major hit. It's gonna, unless you manage the Dockers properly, it keeps the layers keeps accumulating. For example, here the intermediate images will not have much of space, but still, if you don't delete it, the volume will keeps occupying. Because you're pulling images from the repos. Right now, I've been running some 5 to 6 applications. If I see the total space, it will be 4 or 3 gig out of 8 gig of space. So unless you have to manage well, and there are like some issues to I read a couple of them. You can probably share those links at the end of this slides. There are references links that how you can invoke cluster of Dockers and security wise how you can manage it.
Sure.
And then even management, how you can do it, like managing Dockers as an admin, like how we do it in AWS.
One quick question, Shafi. When you showed the you're copy pasting some stuff from here to like a Docker config file.
Yeah.
What's the underlying syntax? Is it like shell scripts? Is it just a
No, I
shell
didn't want to
scripts?
toggle so much between and show the syntax of it.
Yeah.
Like Puppet, how it has its own syntax.
Mhm.
Even Docker has its own syntax.
Oh, Docker has it.
Like there are two things. When you invoke in CLI, the commands are different. When you run with respect to config file, the commands are different. And if you have to run as a REST, now REST, if I say there will be n number of languages, it would be Python, Java, anything. So Java has like, you have to install Maven because it has to pull a Docker jar and then so that it has the ability to communicate to client. I do have examples for that as well, but we have time constraint. Yesterday I had shown the example where I can bind with TCP this address. When I say this, I can access from anywhere the JSON response of the containers. Right? Probably a lot of companies will be thinking how I can do this, that, blah, blah. Like it has a robust number of things, but still there's like one fine, strong product is still not yet out because it's still it's not a stable version. The underlying Docker itself is like in .9. 1.0 is a production go ready where they give support.
When do you think it's going to be production ready?
It's 1.0, they promise it to be a production ready. And then the Dockers have been,
I'm sorry.
He's tight on
When?
time pressure.
is the end of April they say, but
Oh.
there's like delays in the production.
Okay.
Well, I saw that last time when I was working, yesterday when I was working, it was .8, but now they have released
I assume
.9.
this is open source,
It's open source.
and their ways of making money is to house your containers.
I mean, they can be anything. It could be used for
Consultant, probably.
consulting or
Production support.
production.
stuff
If
like
I
that, yeah.
if I show you the example, there are already companies who have the framework ready. The Doku, it's almost something like Mini Heroku. The Jiffy Lab, they're using, different people are using for different purposes. You never know what aspect of Docker they're using it and using. I mean, one good example, if given to me an opportunity, I would definitely want to play around with MongoDB and stuff. You know how it's easy to do it.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. I mean, as a developer, and maybe even for deploying my Java apps for testing purposes, definitely in my VM, I just do it because it's so simple. It gives more power, fine granular control what I want.
Well, I see this as very powerful from the standpoint of deploying something as easy as a Java app or as complex as a Java app and having it contained within a container, a user space. So if I want to now obliterate the Java app, I delete the container and my application's gone. There's no residual effects, there's no residual libraries. From a testing perspective, this is awesome, this is
Yeah.
great. From a application developer's perspective, it's great. Just delete the container and here's
Yeah, exactly. Nothing's gonna happen.
For an operations perspective, it's awesome.
Like a continuous delivery, something.
Yeah.
spin
I mean,
up, and then
you have-
All you
some
need to
test
know is
destroys it and then
what container you came from and where you're going.
Exactly. And then there are like already very nice documentation by Dockers. These examples are like, most of them have taken from Dockers itself. I thought I wanted to go advanced, but if I don't stick to basic, probably the higher level. For me, it's kind of tough to answer and set up the demo. And then there are like cluster level deployment with Fleet. How to orchestration. There are videos in it which I just showed, and then I can have the Puppet also run it to deploy tools what I want at any integrated. The companies like Puppet, SaltStack, they're already supporting it. They already have the APIs for it. This is giving the states of a Docker. I can access the state because they're probably making use of the REST APIs to just link it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and then I can create a pipelines. I can have a pipeline. Hey Docker, these set of stuff data should go in these set of Dockers. So I can create pipelines in this. I mean, this is like a POC or white paper, but it's pretty good. And then there is with respect to performance aspect of it, Linux is, already the companies whoever is working on cloud, they're already exploring these opportunities because it's a big project, billions have been invested. So they can see there's a Linpack probably Pete would know how they do this performance testing. I'm not sure. So this is how they have like n number of with respect to C groups, file system, CPU slicing. So here they show what exactly the C group is responsible in doing. For example, if the C group was not there, this is how the CPUs would have been. But since CPUs are there, whichever is requesting for more CPU, it's giving. And then they just showing the example of Linux LXC concept. But going further, they even give examples on Dockers. I thought it's a good documentary with respect to performance.
Yeah, can you send me?
Yeah, sure. I'll email it to you. I mean, whatever documents I have, I'll just with respect to Commodity virtualization, runtime performance, throughput, block I/O. I mean, probably you should be able to understand more. I'm new to this with respect to scalability point of view. I've never got an opportunity to work on this. I mean, the IBM is already working on this. The footprints, density, they've already done testing. There are white paper submitted. I mean, even I would not recommend to something to use it in production unless there is a good support, unless Dockers they themselves say it. This is good for it, good to go. But something it's good to know. Probably we might come up with some application in near future for sure.
Wasn't Thor working on some kind of image based? So this would even be more sophisticated than that.
Well, Loki
like-
was, not Thor.
Loki.
Yeah, so, but that was still virtualization. So basically, instead of, right now when you instantiate a VM, what happens in the background is all this daisy chain stuff, where we install the OS, we install the Thor application, we install patches and everything else. That's 20, 30 minutes worth of installs that happen. And I don't see that as a replacement for this. I still see you as needing a virtualization layer. But where this helps us is from the application perspective. The namespace of the application now becomes remote into a container, and that's your only instance. So I overheard you saying something about B2B. It'd be as simple as creating a Docker for a B2B instance, and it's like an image. All he does is say, install the image and go. And I don't know. I think security guys have to love this too. You know, if you don't have access back to the root operating system, you're isolated. So, especially you don't have access to all the libraries that the root operating system has.
Right.
Away we go, man.
This is, you've got your own into the kernel up.
Yeah.
Blow it up. Big deal.
Yeah. John Q. Hacker comes in and wants to look at my Tomcat instance. Yeah, well, that's all he gets.
Yeah, but I don't know if this should add meaning where they have like detail on how you can secure the Linux containers. This is by Dockers. This guy, he is a proactive in charge, I guess. He's pretty much in any question you ask it in IRC, they reported really fix it. And a couple of bugs even I fixed it.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So how you can do hardening, blah, blah, blah. It's more like for Linux guys, probably the kernel level working, they might understand it better. I couldn't go beyond my scope of my understanding.
Which slides are these?
These are white papers by Dockers, some major guy who's responsible.
Some guy at Docker.
Jay Pidizzo, all his repos of Docker is assigned to his name.
Some guy at Docker wrote a slide that says, I'm still not convinced.
No. He proves it. Actually, he proves it.
I gotta run, but when you're done, can you just put that in?
Yeah, sure.
Whoever,
I'll do that.
More pizza here, guys.
I got a warm and fuzzy up until that slide.